part of it is just launching and getting punched in the face, right? I mean, you have to realize that you can plan for so much. You get in the ring, somebody hits you, and you adjust your game and keep going at it.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside. Woo!
Hello, and welcome to Upside, the podcast where we're finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Eric Hornung, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. Unreal Collective himself, Jay Klaus. That's right, we haven't talked about it yet, and I wanted to bring it up. Unreal Collective. Jay, how's it going, man?
It's good. We just wrapped up our second cohort of Unreal Collective. 12 weeks just ended this past Friday. We have our showcase tomorrow as we're recording this, which is a Monday. Yeah, it went really well. I'm really stoked with the different businesses that have grown throughout the 12 weeks, the different projects that have taken off. We had one member kill a project that he was working on, which I also mark as a win, to say, hey, I went out and did the work and did the validation to find out what the market wants and what it would take to do this, and I don't want to do that. I think that's great.
That's pretty cool. Well, we won't dive too deep into Unreal Collective, but today we do have a company that's working in internet e-commerce, and I know that you have built your business, at least primarily online and through digital mediums. So I think that it's interesting that there might be some overlap here, but it's also going to be very different because this is more of a productized business, and yours is more, how would you describe it?
Totally. Well, I mean, it's a virtual accelerator. So I mean, we have weekly calls, but there's no productized aspect of it yet. To come soon, my friend, which I'm excited about. But yeah, our guest today, back at it with another marketplace. We seem to love marketplaces here on Upside.
Absolutely. I mean, they have the most upside. That's what we've been told. Before we get into that and who our guest is, Jay, do you want to give the audience a little understanding of why we're here?
Absolutely. So this is the Upside Podcast, where we like to shine a light on founders outside of Silicon Valley. We fundamentally believe that there are great businesses being built here all over the country outside of the Valley with very intelligent, resilient, capital-efficient entrepreneurs. And Eric and I are lucky to meet those people in day-to-day life. And so we said, let's bring that to the rest of the world and show the country, show the world what's going on here in places like Ohio and Minnesota and St. Louis and Kansas City, all over the place.
Yeah, and we're going to do that through a little bit of a unique format. So for the first 15 minutes or so, Jay and I are going to riff on some research that we did independently of each other and talk about the things that we're excited to talk about and ask about in the interview. So that's the second part. About an hour, we'll talk with the founder, ask them questions on themselves, their business, the market, and outlook. And then finally, we'll wrap up with the debrief. That'll be another 15 to 20 minutes, and we'll talk about that when we get to the end. Jay, who are we talking to today?
Today we are talking to Chris Sense. Chris Sense is the founder and CEO of F13 Works in Columbus, Ohio. Chris has a background in the development and implementation of customer-facing growth initiatives, including marketing, interactive communications, and market development strategies for the e-commerce, consumer, and high-tech industries. Prior to F13 Works, Chris was a president at Screened, a Columbus e-commerce company. He has spent time at Dynamit as well as Blind Acre. F13 Works bridges the gap between manufacturers and e-commerce websites. It provides manufacturers, drop shippers, and order fulfillers of all types with a connection to millions of online stores. Orders from third-party sites will seamlessly enter their production process, and payments will be automatically processed. A lot of alliteration with P's there. Eric, we're going to have to get pop filters soon.
So they also have a podcast that is called the Product Pain Points Podcast, and all I was thinking was, man, we really should have invested in those.
But I'm excited. You know, my understanding of F13 Works from reading some articles, talking to Chris, listening to some interviews with him, is sort of an Amazonification of different online stores. He calls it extending the aisle. Did you come across this, Eric?
I did, and I wouldn't call it an Amazonification at all. So that's interesting that we have such a right up front difference in our understanding. So looking at the extending the aisle, that to me feels like, okay, if I was a brick and mortar store, and let's just take where the actual metaphor comes from. If I was a brick and mortar store and I had an aisle of toys, I only have so much physical space that I can put those toys in. Extending the aisle, I can keep toys in that space, right? So if you think about one of the websites that he's working with, which seems to be maybe something like, I think about like a Gallantry. I don't know if you've ever used Gallantry. It's a...
Never.
Okay. So it's like a site for like men's accessories, bags, and it's all curated. So whenever they can find a new bag or brand that works with them, they'll add it to the site. And I just really like the feel and the vibe and everything on there. Now, Amazon seems to be more of like the everything store or like an endless aisle almost. And we might even hear Chris say that word. So I think that that's a little bit of the difference that they're going for, is Chris wants to help firms extend the aisle, not have endless aisles.
Yeah, probably an oversimplification on my end, but the idea of, let's say I have a Shopify store and I have a brand that has loyal customers and I sell t-shirts. My customers may be interested in buying other items from me that I don't manufacture and sell directly or handle the inventory. So F13 Works plugs into my online store to match me with other items that I can sell through my online store to my loyal customers that I don't have to take on inventory risk, but I also don't have to give my customers a reason to leave the site to buy other things. I can take a cut of that transaction.
Yeah, it's almost like centralized drop shipping in a way, in that way.
I believe they have some roots in drop shipping, so I'm interested to hear from him some of the history of F13 Works, because I know that for a while they were also creating one-off Shopify apps, and now they have a centralized Shopify app that works this way. So what's interesting to me about this is that it does currently seem to be predicated on Shopify stores as a Shopify app, which I'm not sure of a business at scale that is kind of predicated on a Shopify app. Do you have any examples, or what do you think?
I don't have any examples, but I do have some questions. The Shopify app that you just referred to, I wasn't aware that they only had one. Based on their Twitter bio, they have 4. So I would like to get a little bit of clarification on that. And also their network that they promote on their website, I want to get a little bit of an understanding on that. Is that just the Shopify network that they have access to, or is it a proprietary network that they're building across platforms? I didn't really get a feel for that. It was something like 300,000 stores, 10 billion in gross merchandise value, and like 130 million in something else. I forget what that was.
Yeah, my impression was that was pulling numbers from Shopify. I know I listened to an interview from February 2018 with Chris, and he mentioned they were accessing 650,000 stores at this point through the Shopify network. So interested to hear what their distribution is. It's a two-sided marketplace, so what is the volume of supply and demand? My guess, as it always is that they're focused on building up supply.
Yep.
And so I'm interested to hear what their strategy for doing that is. My guess is that their cost drivers are few and that their overhead's pretty low, given that this is completely online. They're creating a technology that works through Shopify. I'm guessing their overhead is physical space for their office, their headcount, probably people who are account managers or bringing on strategic partners. So that's good news. That helps create a longer runway. Obviously, the retail e-commerce space is huge. Number I saw was something like $462 billion in 2018 will be spent in the retail e-commerce space. So room for a lot of players.
What percentage of that is Amazon?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Do you have a guess?
I didn't listen. I actually have their letter right here, so I could probably find their... Yeah, I read Amazon's letter.
That's amazing.
It doesn't say in the top line what their revenue is, but I'm sure it's massive.
Yeah, so giant elephant in the room. Amazon's got to be a competitor here, right? Wonder how else he considers competition. I know that he's thinking of this as kind of an unlocking potential for both sides of the marketplace. And so he probably has a different take on competition than just saying Amazon's a competitor. But at the end of the day, all of his brands that are on the platform who have their loyal audiences and who drive people to their website, their competition is Amazon. And if he's powering these brands, then by extension, I would say his competition is the likes of Amazon and Walmart, everyone else in that space. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think that, so they did, on their website, there was a video, and one of the last slides kind of laid out where retailers can be spending their money, right? So there's brick and mortar stores, where retailers are going to get their revenues from. Brick and mortar stores, Amazon/eBay, branded stores like Gallantry, and I think that's the market they're focusing on, and then their own personal stores. So one example might be Herschel bags. I have one right here. So Herschel bags might sell some of its like cheaper, older models on Amazon. They might sell some exclusive things with partnerships with Macy's. They might sell the core and all of their current line at something like HerschelBags.com or Herschel.com. And then there's all of these specialty stores like a Gallantry where they could actually place their bags because it aligns with the customer and type of person who shops at that specific store. So I think he's trying to grow. We see this phenomenon right now in retail e-commerce of like niche markets. And you and I are both fans of Tropical MBA. So I think maybe it's a little overblown because we both listen to it all the time. But that niche website space is kind of blowing up as like a almost like revolt to the Amazons of the world. Mm-hmm. So I think that this is a way to help grow them by giving a menu of potential products that are out there that maybe they could pick for their business and be thoughtful about.
Yeah, Shopify is such an interesting environment to me. Another friend of mine is heavy into the Shopify space, and he's convinced that a lot of the future of e-commerce is this continued niching down. And he says, as entrepreneurs, there's a huge opportunity for you to take niche products, spin up a brand around them, get really good at digital advertising, and kind of cash in on this drop shipping model where you don't even have to handle SKUs. You just create the brand, you white label the products and sell them through. And that's something that probably isn't a huge focus for F13 Works to power people like that. But as an individual, that is absolutely something you could do with F13 Works, is create a Shopify store and really just sell the products of other people who are plugging their products into F13 Works. And bada bing, bada boom, you've got an online business.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty fascinated to hear a couple of things. One, what is their business model? Are they charging percentage of whatever is sold, or are they charging like a placement fee? Two, they say that stores are allowed to pull from F13 Works kind of, I call it a database. It's probably not what they call it. Catalog. So they can pull any of the products that are on F13 Works catalog. Are they also pushing products? Because that would be interesting if manufacturers could also pay to kind of promote their products almost. And then finally, looking at kind of their KPIs, what are their costs to kind of acquire a customer on the demand side? And there was one other one, and I just blanked on it.
This is one of my favorite things when I do research and I can answer a question that you have.
Oh, look at that.
A couple things that I found on the model. They have a SaaS fee, a monthly service fee on both sides of the marketplace, which seems to be their main revenue driver. He says they also make a very small percentage on transactions, very small percentage in quotation marks is what he said. And obviously the hope there is to make that up on a huge volume of transactions. Third lever that he has mentioned is that there are levels of capabilities, as he called it, where different retailers will pay extra to have exclusivities for certain products.
Cool. And I did remember my final thing based on what you just said, so thank you.
Hit me.
Conversion rate. So what is their conversion rate from, they have this big catalog of however many products, how many are actually getting pulled down, and then how many are actually getting sold? Because that, to me, is going to be, that's going to be the most important number in this business.
All right. Well, you ready to talk to Chris?
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Let's jump in.
Let's do it. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it, guys.
Can you tell us in your own words how F13 works?
F13 Works Square, right? So yeah, F13 Works is a software solution that connects suppliers and retailers. So within e-commerce, you have these huge players like Amazon, Walmart, even your Zappos of the world. And what they've done to take over the world of e-commerce is they've said, hey, I can't possibly sell everything that my customers want. So I'm going to extend my aisle. and I'm going to sell things that other people send to my customers, which is the idea of drop shipping. And this was reserved for really a few sites. I mean, for a very long time, it was like 15 to 25 sites, huge mega sites, like the ones I mentioned that were doing this. And it was reserved just for them. Really, there weren't a lot of other ways for people to do this. So we found F13 Works to help as a solution. So if you're an e-commerce store, you can add products to really round out your product selection, own your space more so than you can by buying the merchandise, inventorying, figuring all that out. And if you're a supplier, so if you have products, the beautiful thing is you have a new distribution channel. And that's really powerful because you can right now sell in brick and mortars. You can sell on your own website. You might be able to sell on eBay or Amazon. But if you can sell through hundreds of thousands of independent e-commerce sites, almost like boutiques, you can reach an audience. You can get your message across in a way that's very difficult to do these days.
So, Chris, can you tell us about how you came up with F13 Works? What was the moment that made that business and that idea click for you to see this as a need?
Yeah, it was a need that I had. So I was working with a company that primarily did t-shirt sales. And they brought me in about 8 years into their history to help them grow. And there's a couple ways to grow. It's customer acquisition, or you get more value out of your existing customers. Those are the easiest two. And getting value out of existing customers was the name of the game. And went about it, ask our customers what they'd like to buy from us other than t-shirts. Overwhelmingly positive response for a couple of other products. It was really easy to find suppliers of these products, but to get their products on our site and figure out who gets paid for what, how we can track orders was just a nightmare. So the light bulb went off, and that the rest was kind of history. So I started asking, within my network, hey, is this something everyone else is running into? Is it just us? I figured it was probably fairly universal. And it ended up being absolutely ubiquitous. Everyone wanted to sell on other sites, and almost every site we talked to wanted more products for their customers.
So what do you think was the divide for that not existing prior to F13 Works? Because if both sides of this marketplace are hungry for this, where was the lack of communication to understand how that could work?
Yeah, it was right place, right time. So a lot of people were getting around this in hackish approaches. So Jay, you'd have a product, I'd have a website, and I'd be sending you emails daily saying, hey, here's some orders, could you fulfill them? Really not scalable solutions were out there. With the advent of things like Shopify and WooCommerce becoming really popular, all of a sudden you had consistent platforms that lots of shops were on. 10 years ago, this would have been almost impossible because everyone had to custom build their own e-commerce site. There's really no uniformity. With Shopify exploding, with WooCommerce becoming a little bit better than it had been, and Magento 2 coming out, and BigCommerce, all of a sudden you have 12 e-commerce platforms that make up 75 to 80% of all e-commerce sites. And so all of a sudden a software solution like this became a real thing. Before this, it would have been, hey, I'm going to create a software solution, have to one-off, plug it into each and every e-commerce site, and that's not a great solution.
Okay, that's interesting. So can you explain to me, as a brand partner that wants to integrate F13 into my website, what does that look like? What's that experience look like for me?
Yeah, so from the supplier side or the retailer side?
From the retailer side.
Can we define those terms for the audience?
Absolutely. So we call suppliers brands or product companies. They're people who can send products to end customers. So, we have people like Gription and GripMat, who have a select line of niche products, a very hyper-specific audience, all the way to large distributors who have 10,000 plus SKUs that they want to get out the door. So those are the supplier side. And then on the other side is the retail partners. A retailer is somebody with an e-commerce site. And these guys come in all shapes and sizes, from a mom and pop, someone who just read, hey, I can make money online, I want to start an e-commerce store, to very sophisticated retailers doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year in e-commerce. Some of them have brick and mortar and e-commerce as well. So it's a decent mix of people. Right now, we only plug into Shopify. We'll be on WooCommerce next. That will be within the next few months here. But Shopify, it's super easy. So if you're a retailer, you simply go to the app marketplace. Similar to if you're familiar with WordPress, they have plugins. Shopify just calls their plugins apps. And we have a bunch of different apps. The big one for us is Product Pro. It's the one that we control. Everything else we do is really just people leveraging our technology for their own apps. But with Product Pro, you download the app, it plugs into your store, and you get to go through a product catalog. So you get to search for whatever type of product that you'd like to add to your store. It adds pictures, descriptions, titles, pricing. You can tweak those to fit your brand if you need to. And a lot of the savvy retailers are doing just that. And then we sit there and track. So whenever a product that we put on your site is ordered, we're going to trigger a fulfillment on our supplier side. Then we're going to track that, send the tracking number down to the e-commerce site, which is then going to send that to the actual customer.
What's the conversion and conversion funnel look like on that? How many products are on Product Pro? How many are selected to be put on sites? And then how many from there on a percentage basis or whatever are actually purchased?
That's a great question. Our analytics are definitely a weakness within our application, I'd have to admit, just because we move so fast. So though we're a 2-year-old company, we started just with white labels. So it was really like, hey, here's software. You can get your own app, go and do with it what you'd like. We found that a lot of people didn't really want their own app necessarily. So it takes a pretty sophisticated and large operation to really handle all of that. So we released Product Pro in mid-January of 2018. So it's a newer venture for us. And we've grown it about tenfold every month. So it's been exponential growth, and the focus has been growing the technology with the user growth rather than let's perfect everything. But to give you an idea, our average supplier is working with about 100 partners. Then we have over 100 suppliers. There are 10,000 users on the platform. So obviously some of these suppliers are working with thousands and thousands of retailers. And then as far as product penetration goes, we're putting so many products on. I don't have a very clear view into that at this point, and that's something that we definitely want to get our heads better around.
Can you explain to me, when you say 10,000 users on the platform, is that 10,000 people who have made a purchase through Product Pro, or is that 10,000 supplier partners?
It's 10,000 retailers. So it's a B2B2C play. So we have the suppliers' products are sitting basically in our software, and then the other B would be the retailers who are pulling those on their site, and then the consumer would come into the retailer site and purchase it. So it's 10,000 of those retailers who are downloading the app and putting products onto their site.
And that 10x month-to-month growth is something on the retail side as well?
Yeah, okay. That's our biggest growth. I mean, it's amazing how many people are looking for this. We have our biggest competitor is called Oberlo, and they have an interesting play. They started probably 9 months before we did. Really got to market very quickly because what they did is they just scraped AliExpress. So whereas we have relationships with our suppliers, they just simply scraped it. It's a brilliant move. It's just a different move. So the problem with scraping it is there's nobody checking. So you're looking at 30 to 40% issue rate on orders, which is not great. And a lot of people don't know to build that into their margins. So when we came to the market with, hey, we have these vetted suppliers, almost all of them are based in the United States with their products. So they might not be U.S. companies, but their products are sitting in the United States. The market really likes that. It's very welcome to e-commerce stores who are saying, oh, my customer's not willing to wait for 30 to 45 days for a product and then get the wrong product or have a product never show up without any recourse.
You mentioned they have 30% plus issue rate on orders. What is you said that's not great. What is a good or great issue rate in this space?
It should be under 5%. I mean, we have very occasional issues. And when we have issues, it is something like print on demand company that we work with sent out a shirt that had a small issue with the print. Oftentimes the issues on our competitor sides are either have outright fraud, which happens, they're scraping a site. So they don't check that this listing on AliExpress is a legitimate listing. Or translation. You're talking about lots of parties into it. A lot of people who are on AliExpress aren't actually creating the products. So they are kind of these people in China who are going to factories and cutting deals, and they're a middleman who then posts stuff to AliExpress. And then there's another middleman picking that up. Then there's another middleman putting that on a site and somebody else buying it. So a big, thick middle there means between Mandarin and English and all the parties that it's really easy to order a pink T-shirt and get a black pen. I just had no idea. Yeah, there's no fraud that people thought, but hey, along the way, somebody just mistranslated it. Now my customer is upset.
And I would assume that's a pretty big reputational risk for these websites, right? Because if they're extending their aisle and they say, I have customers coming to me and buying my products, they love them, I want to give them more products. But every time they buy those products, as an unsavvy consumer, I might not know the difference between what is coming directly from this brand that I appreciate and not. But if I have an issue a third of the time that I buy something, that would be a problem. I'm assuming you hear that from your customers.
We hear amazing stories. We love one of my favorites is we have a great partner now, but they were using Oberlo and they were very sophisticated. So these guys had relationships with their Chinese suppliers via Oberlo. Then they took them kind of through AliExpress and had a direct relationship with them. And they had 3,000 units that were misfilled. So what had happened is there was a factory in China that was fulfilling these. And one day the guy woke up and had too many orders, so he just sold the orders to a different factory. And there was no recourse. So unfortunately, it took 3,000 customers receiving these orders in November, December of 2017, and the retailer is screwed. I mean, their reputation was tanked. This is a growing company. They grew from almost nothing to doing, millions of dollars in business in about a 5-month span. So you talk about that ramp up, which is fantastic. And then it just all kind of plateaus and comes down because the reputation, nobody wants to buy from you. If your Facebook, you have hundreds of people saying this is a scam. They send out junk. People are contacting Better Business Bureau. Your Google reviews are terrible. So it was just tough. And they came to us with open arms. They said, oh my gosh, you guys could help fix it. This would never happen. You vet them and they're US based, right? So it wouldn't take that 30-day plus turnaround before our customers even tell us that there was an issue. Yeah. So we've got your back. So they're a great partner now.
So you guys put a little bit more in terms of time and resources into the upfront so that you mitigate your downside risk in the long term. What's the general cost structure of F13 Works? I'm assuming that leads to increased costs on the upfront, but generally you have development costs, you have this kind of review costs. What other cost drivers are there in the business?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's our staff, which is developers, sales, and marketing folks, and hosting will certainly be a technology cost bucket, and then it's going to be acquisition costs. So right now we're in a weird spot where we kind of blew up somewhat quickly with our latest app releases, and it's fantastic, but we really want to get after the marketing efforts, and our acquisition costs will definitely increase once our technology base catches up with our user base.
And acquisition cost, that's the acquisition cost to acquire a retailer or a supplier?
Both. It's on both sides, but really we want to ramp up our retailers in our next phase. So right now we've found enough kind of buckets of suppliers that are really interested, and they're kind of queued up, and many of them are just waiting to come on board, which is fantastic, and we continue to push that. Paul Teppenhart is actually leading our efforts on the supplier sales side. I know Jay knows Paul.
Better call Paul.
Better call Paul. And then on the flip side, it's just getting the word out, letting people know that this app called Product Pro on Shopify exists. And if you're not on Shopify, you have some type of other e-commerce platform, let us know and we'll put you, we'll alert you as soon as we get to your e-commerce platform.
So with Shopify being such a large ecosystem itself, when you have new partners coming on board, are they finding you organically through the Shopify store, or how much of your acquisition is an active outbound effort?
Right now it's organic. We were somewhat lucky. Within our first 30 days, we were picked up by Shopify to be featured on their front page. So that helped. They only put us, they put you on for 7 days and flip you out. But in that 7 days, we got, a lot of traction. And we've had kind of a trickle from that traction. We've played around with ads just a little bit, but right now we've kind of holding back until our software, can really handle and scale up and sort the products really well and give the best user experience there can be, because we don't want to double our users or get to 100,000, which would be the tenfold increase that we're looking forward to next, and have people walking away disappointed or with a bad taste in their mouth.
So looking at 10x growth to date, at least based on Crunchbase, it looks like you guys have raised about $300,000 from 2 venture capital firms. What has that process looked like so far, and what does it look like going forward?
Yeah, so the raising money is wild, right? I mean, it takes patience. We had an interesting situation. I've been a part of a few startups, mostly traditional job background with agencies and client-side work in marketing and management. So this was my first time I've ever had to take the lead on raising money, and it was quite a learning experience for me. We had some money offers early on, and it looks good and feels really good when you go to market and you're like, hey, I've got this idea, and people want to throw money at you. But I was very fortunate to kind of take a step back and talk to some people who've become mentors to me and say, hey, should I take this money early on? Should we kind of wait for the right money? What does this all look like? And so we kind of deferred and ended up partnering with Red Hawk Ventures. Tim, the CEO, is on my board, and at first he was really just a mentor to me, somebody I'd go to and ask for advice, and said, hey, what's the right point to raise, and how do we raise? And we worked on that for quite a while. In September, we closed the first tranche of our first round, and we set it up to do basically a 2-tranched first round, and based on goals, and those goals were really revenue-based, to make the investors say, hey, we have a little bit of revenue now, but we think we can increase this very quickly. And we did so, and that really impressed the investors. So we actually raised the rest of our first round and closed in, let's say, March, late February, early March of 2018. So we're 600 in now, and we're really looking to, our next big goal is to get to a point where we're in control of our financial situation. We're making significantly more than we're spending, get rid of that burn.
And everything you guys make at this point, your revenue is pretty much profit for you guys, right? Because you're taking, I think I heard, a monthly SaaS fee as well as some level of transactions. So can you talk about that model a little bit?
Yeah, we have a SaaS fee on both sides. So both our suppliers and our retailers are paying us to have access to the program. And then we take a very small percentage of the orders across our system. So, think kind of credit card-esque fees. The idea is we don't really want to increase the costs. We want the people who are fulfilling the products to make a good cut. The people who are selling and marketing those products to have a great cut. We just kind of minimal cut in between and really make money on really high volume. But yeah, it's a model that works for us. I think it's attractive to a lot of folks. The alternative, if you are on the supplier side, is to try to make an app yourself, and it's going to be a lot more expensive than our SaaS fees. Or on the retailer side, we have some competition now, but the prices are similar, and our product selection is just fantastic. We have some amazing supplier partners.
Can you talk about some of those and give us some examples of who some of those supplier partners are?
Yeah. We have a lot of breadth and some depth in different categories. So, within the apparel category, we have a handful of print-on-demand companies that do some great work. Within Product Pro, e-retailing is the exclusive supplier of apparel, and they have some really cool products there. If you guys have been on to Shopify before, you're probably familiar with Printful. These guys are better. Their prices are better, the quality is better. They have a lot of experience in this space, and they're right out of Columbus, Ohio. We have a custom app that we made for Traxler as well that he has. It's a private app right now that he has some of his clients on. He's expanding that. It's going to be a big piece of his business moving forwards. But then again, within Product Pro, we have a number of Shark Tank companies. So we mentioned Grip Mat. We have Cut Buddy, Fiber Fix, 4 or 5 others. I'm not great with everyone who's on there, but there's some kind of cool, unique products like that. And then on the kind of more broad category products, we have everything from tents and bike accessories to jewelry and pre-made clothing, really stylish products, workout gear. So it's extensive, the product catalog. The idea was we want to be the go-to spot where people can find whatever they need for their site, whether it's a large retailer or a small mom and pops retailer. We should have something for you, and it should be really quality product. And a lot of them have cool, unique stories to them as well.
And do you find that supply is sort of your constraint? You mentioned some companies that are ready to go and jump on the platform and they're just kind of waiting. Is driving supply of more products one of your largest focuses?
Largest focus right now is development. So we built this and the user base increased very quickly. And we found that we need to do things on the front end and on the back end to support those users that we just weren't expecting to do so quickly. Some of that's just categorizing our catalog better, making things more findable, making it easier to get products on the site, sharing insights in a better fashion. If you have a store that sells shoes and we see that audience and we can say, hey, you should be selling these socks. There's a really high likelihood that your audience would buy these products. We want to be offering those product suggestions. We want to really help people rather than just give them a book to look through essentially online. We want to be actively saying, hey, you sell this stuff, you should be selling this, and aid in their product selection and categorization. So that's an area in which with a couple users, it's easy. But once you start really cranking it up, you realize, okay, I have a ton of products and an okay user base. We can probably do better to connect these things together a little bit.
So it's not that the technology is breaking in any way. You just have users with a large array of needs right now that you haven't had the time to develop.
Certainly. And it's not as fast as I'd like it to be. It's not breaking, but as far as speed goes, speed's the name of the game. So, we need to speed up everything. We switched over to a Google Cloud platform recently, and that's helped. But again, being on GCP and optimizing for GCP are two different things. So there are a lot of incremental steps for us as far as just make it a better user experience, make it something that people are really excited about. And we want to be class leaders in this stuff. We know that our products are leaders. Every product company, every supplier that we work with is amazing, is really top of the class in whatever product category they're in. We want the software to be the same way. We want people to be copying off of everything we do. Every time we release a feature, we want to see all the competitors go out there and try to do the same thing.
Can you talk to me about what constraints exist developing within the Shopify ecosystem or any risks that exist by being so closely coupled to Shopify?
Yeah, that's a great question because there are definitely risks. Shopify is growing at an amazing pace. You can look at them, just their stock market. Their stock has exploded, but their user base has, the GMV has. It's an amazing space. It's a really cool partner, but they're trying to figure things out as well. And there's definitely a risk there because they have an open app ecosystem, and that's a good thing. But they're going to start realizing that they need to control things, and how they control things and what they do to control those things, could definitely have an effect on our business when we're so reliant on Shopify right now. So that's one of the reasons that we want to be on a lot of e-commerce platforms. And we try to be as close to Shopify as they'll let us be. So, we're not a vendor that gets flown out there or anything just yet, but we certainly have an open communication with them. And anytime they have questions or feedback, we're very quick to respond and make sure that, they're happy with everything. And as I said, we were lucky enough to get featured earlier this year. And that was really exciting for us. That wasn't something that we really knew was going to happen, or I wish I could say that I made that happen, but they just kind of picked us. They saw that enough users were adopting this new app and staying with it and giving it good reviews that they wanted to feature us. So it's dangerous to plug up against one partner, but they seem like a good partner so far, and I'm looking forward to what they do as they continue to grow as a company.
So WooCommerce is next, as you mentioned earlier, and then you said other e-commerce platforms What are some of those other e-commerce platforms that maybe are further down the road other than Shopify and WooCommerce?
Yeah, so BigCommerce is probably one of Shopify's larger competitors that's trailing behind a decent amount, but they are trying to catch up. We've actually had some active outreach from some other e-commerce platforms that are trying to establish themselves, which has been interesting. But Magento too, Magento is kind of trying to come back, and we want to be part of that. And then there's this long list that I just don't know off the top of my head, but those two for sure, Magento too, and BigCommerce, and then the list kind of goes on and on.
Can you give me a little bit of a breakdown? Let's say I'm a Shopify retailer. I have a Shopify store. When I'm selling a product, what does the share of a sale look like? Let's say I sell a $50 product. Is there a credit card transaction fee? Am I giving a Shopify fee? I have a monthly fee to you and a transaction fee to you. What's the breakdown of where money is coming in and going out?
So customer comes into a site, their financial transaction with the site's sacred. So we don't touch that in any way, shape, or form. So customer's going to go to your site. They're going to buy something. Shopify on a per transaction charges 2.9 plus 30 cents, so 2.9% plus 30 cents on a standard monthly fee. So you can subscribe to pay more a month and get that kind of cut down if you want. But that's pretty standard. If it's $50 and you're using our Product Pro app, you're probably going to make about $25 on it. So our margins range from 30% at the bottom up to 60% at the top. Some actually even more in jewelry. The margins are pretty crazy. But I'd say the 30 to 60% is pretty safe space. So you'll probably make $25 and that's yours. There's nothing more to that. The product will be sent to your customer. They'll get it. You'll know because there's tracking. And that $25 will go back. The majority of that will go back to the supplier.
And you're saying that's just an average of what you know of the products that are on your platform. The average of the product margins that you guys are selling are 30 to 60%.
Yeah. So one of the big things we do is when you look at products on our platform within the product card, you'll see the margins clearly displayed as a percentage. And you'll say, hey, this is how much this cost me. This is what the MSRP is. This is the margin. And this is the expected shipping time. And those are the really big key factors in running an e-commerce store. So that's what we want to get across quickly.
And so I think you said earlier that as the owner of the website, I go into Product Pro and I choose what products I want to list to extend my aisle. What are your future plans for how that looks? Do you want to be serving up suggestions?
Yep, you hit it on the head. We want to be the smart merchandiser. So we look at how the big successful companies do it. And one of the things Columbus has done very well is they have these merchandisers at these large retailers. You look at Express and Abercrombie, Victoria's Secret, Bath and Body Works, and the way they buy is there's a very great scientific system around it. And they're buying and they're really thinking how this stuff sells, and my wife's actually in merchandise planning, so I get a little bit more insight than most. But her job is to lay out the financials of a specific line at Express. So she needs to make sure they maximize the profit of any product that they put out on store. That's very complex. It takes very, very intelligent people to do who are talented and know a lot more information than almost any e-commerce store is going to have. I mean, I can tell you that even Amazon is having trouble with this because Amazon's coming after the people in Columbus Market who have this experience in offering them basically anything they want. It's very powerful. And to say, hey, as a Shopify owner, if we can build that intelligence in and say, hey, you should be putting these products out there based on all this data that we have, I think it can be a game changer. And that's a big next step for us, is putting the intelligence behind the application and then sharing that intelligence downstream. So you're going in fully armed as a store, knowing that, hey, I sell t-shirts today. If I sell leggings tomorrow, I can expect this bump in revenue with my existing customer base just by sending out an email or social media post.
Do you see yourself as helping these retailers compete with an Amazon?
Absolutely. So that's really our goal. I see the future of retail being kind of a bifurcation between these mammoths like an Amazon and a Walmart and eBay and the rest of the world, which is independent stores that have stories, that have a brand, that have an element to them that they want to share. They want to have an intimate relationship with their customers. And that's the side of it that we want to support. That's the flip half of it. So you can go to Amazon, it's everything store. You'll find whatever you want there. But getting a story across on Amazon is hard as a brand. There's really no customer relationship there. You can do that in a really boutique fashion. And if you look at the way people are shopping generationally, our generation and down, millennials on down the line, definitely want a story. You want to wear a shirt that has a little bit more story to it than, hey, it was super cheap and somebody made this in China for pennies. That's not a great story. You want to wear shoes, you want to have glasses, you want to have accessories, you want to buy everything that kind of has a little bit more to it because then you feel good about it. And that's the side of things that we want to get on. And one of the things holding that back is that they can't extend their aisle. They can't Amazonify, is another word we throw around themselves. And so we say, hey, own your brand, own your category. Don't be the everything store, but really extend it. If you're an outdoor store, sell some other products that support the outdoors lifestyle, but you might not want to buy ahead. You might not want to manufacture yourself, but there are great companies that are already doing that.
Super interesting you use the word Amazonify in our intro. Eric and I discussed this a little bit. Can you explain what you mean by Amazonify?
Yeah, so take a look at what Amazon's doing and do it yourself. So there's a couple things that they're doing that really set them apart. They have endless aisle. So they've extended their aisle to the point that you can find just about anything you'd ever want on Amazon. If it's legal, they probably sell it. And then use that intelligence to mold and shape your own product selection. So one of the things that we talk about with some of the larger retailers, and we're moving into a phase of business in which we want to support all these small retailers, and there are some large retailers we'd like to work with as well. You can extend your aisle and learn from what people are purchasing. You can get ahead of trends very quickly by supplementing your offering of what you manufacture with what people are manufacturing themselves, and by partnering with these other products and supplier partners.
So you're saying, and let me just rephrase here, you want to be able to give retailers the ability to, one, sell better products that align with their story, and two, learn from selling those products so that they can grow their own product line. Am I correct there?
You are correct.
Very cool.
Something you just touched on, Chris, a little bit ago was talking about Columbus as a retail hub and the access to some of the people here as important to you. One, I wanted to clarify, did you say that there are people in town that are experts in this space to the point that Amazon is trying to hire them? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I know folks in the space who have worked with the major retailers in town. They're very attractive for a lot of retailers outside of Columbus because they do things kind of the limited way. So Wexner came out with an approach in retail that has been special in that you're maximizing the profit and the return on these products that they're putting out there in the merchandising in somewhat sophisticated ways. And it's interesting because they do it both because the brands have a bit of a necessity. There are brands that don't do it this way because they don't necessarily have to. So if you're like a Nike or Under Armour, you can just throw things out there. You're going to make enough selling this stuff that your margins are going to make up for some of the waste that you have. And then you can kind of throw it in some outlets and get rid of it at the end of the day. Some of the brands here in town don't move stuff like that. So they have to be a little bit more intelligent, and that intelligence is becoming more and more attractive as retail moves along and evolves. So definitely there's some great things going on in Columbus within that space. And the more exposure that I've gotten to it, the more impressed that I've been with just what people are doing. And that's probably about as much as I know. There's a lot more there that we're doing to be special. And there's struggles too. Obviously, we've had a couple companies go under within the last 2 to 5 years. But all in all, there's a lot that can be taken away and learned from the way that we're doing things.
I want to jump back into a couple questions about some of the numbers behind this. Jay, did you want to keep on heading down that geographic path for a second?
I did have one more question. Chris, obviously you've made the decision to build F13 Works here in Columbus, Ohio. How much is that impacted by the retail scene here? How much is necessity? Can you talk about what it's like building a business here?
Yeah, I mean, Columbus is a very diverse town. And, I didn't set out to build a company in Columbus, Ohio. It wasn't that, hey, this is the perfect spot for it. But again, dumb luck's the name of my game, I suppose. I was exposed to a smaller retailer and got to run a retail company. And that exposed me to a lot of things. And then just the community and knowing and learning from people. I'm part of a couple of groups that are made up of members who worked at these large retailers, and some of them actively still do. Just to learn from them has been very special. Past that, the technology scene's growing. A partner like a Rev1 is special. They enabled us to do a lot of what we've done. They gave us the space to do it. It's not the easiest thing to work out of your house every day, and that's how I started. Is me and my co-founder were working literally in my little office. There's just a lot of special things that Columbus brings that we didn't necessarily set out and scope it and map and say Columbus is the perfect spot, but it was serendipity and it worked out really well.
Cool. 2 quick things on numbers that I missed from earlier that I meant to ask. What's like your average retailer lifetime on the platform, or is there any real churn that kind of goes through this when people like try an app and then maybe don't like it and kind of bounce off?
We don't know enough about lifetime value of the retailers right now because we released in mid-January. Mm-hmm. So we assume that that there will be probably more churn over time, but we're not sure because it's somewhat sticky in nature, by nature, and that if you put a product on your site, the idea of taking it off your site, especially if you have a lot of products, and then not paying for it it's pretty low. And we released in January, so about a year, just shy of a year in, you're going to be in Q4, which nobody wants to take anything off their site in Q4. So it'll be interesting to see. Those are good questions. The nature of Shopify that we've seen is there is a percentage of people who just download an app, look at it, and leave. And we're still trying to lock in what that is over the long haul. I mean, we see a lot of same-day uninstalls, but going past 24, 48 hours is pretty low. But again, we're pretty early on to really understand churn and have a confident, hey, this is my customer lifetime value, and this is what churn looks like based on these. And what we want to do is say, hey, if you come in and you put a credit card on file with us, you have this percentage chance of leaving within this amount of time. If you add one product, if you had 10 products, so we'll start to bucket people. But right now it's pretty early, so we're again pretty high level, just saying, well, there's churn. We know the numbers to expect, but we expect there's probably going to be more over 6, 12, 18 months. We just aren't there yet.
And then looking at the average, I know that the numbers are you're still learning them, but the average number of transactions per retailer, is that something that you guys have seen or have even an inkling of at this point?
Yeah, the average would throw things off a ton. So we have
a ranges,
we have a few percent of retailers who are doing the vast majority of all the volume.
Okay.
And I think that's the way with Shopify. So we have 2 years of running other people's apps. We have data from those apps, and we know it's very similar. There's a lot of people on Shopify. 650,000 stores last time we checked. My guess is talking 5% doing anything really impactful as far as revenue. And we're experiencing pretty similar ratios on our end that we've seen across our other apps. A lot of people on Shopify, a lot of people with stores, a sale here, a sale there, but there's a small percentage that are making up the vast majority of that volume.
So you mentioned your other apps. What is the kind of weighting right now that you're giving each of this? We spent a lot of this interview discussing Product Pro. What's going to happen with those other apps? Are they going to be focus areas going forward, or is Product Pro going to kind of be the flagship and take over everything in terms of time and resources?
The nice thing is with Product Pro, the way our software is built is they're all in the same framework. Okay. So anytime we can get something added to Product Pro, we can back that into everyone else's, and vice versa. We've had a few of our private label companies who have come up with great ideas that we'll take from their app and spread to everyone else's.
What are the KPIs that you pay attention to, Chris?
Overall, we're looking at GMV, so really products moving in revenue on our platform.
Can you define GMV?
So GMV within retail software is kind of one of the main measures of any platform where products are moving. So GMV is gross merchandise value or volume, but the idea is just how much is being paid for across your system. So it's how much are suppliers getting paid gross on a regular basis. So it's really important that we're moving a lot of product and that our suppliers are successful, because that means our retailers are successful too. So if you just look at products moving, we know both sides are doing pretty well. And then you can break that down. Sub-metrics within that are your number of retailers, your number of suppliers, the number of products they have. But at a high level, that GMV number works out pretty well to crack it. Past that, obviously, our users, as a startup, we need to watch our burn in financials. And then, we break down things at a team level. So, our marketing team has customer acquisition costs and is looking at bringing on retailers. Our, supplier team, similarly is trying to bring on suppliers and do that really efficiently.
What's the size of your team right now?
We have 5 full-time, and then we have 4 contractors and interns.
And the full-time are mostly developers, or what are they focused on?
So we have 2 developers right now that are full-time, and then we're working with AWH right now. We've worked with a few other outside contracting firms in the past. And then we have salesman Paul Teppenhart is leading sales, as I said. He's looking at suppliers. Myron Goldsmith is helping with retail marketing and account management. And then, everyone else is a mix of dev contractor support, sales support, marketing support.
The retail e-commerce space is huge. How big can F13 Works be? What's the pie that you're looking at here?
We think that we can really expand it into retail as a whole. So it's a $4.7 trillion market, which is wrap my head around that one. We think we can be a significant player in the market as far as where volume goes, supporting these independent stores, crossing over into the brick and mortar space. It would be one of the long-term, plays for us. That there's some unique things that we can do, being an aggregator that a traditional, player could not do. So we really think we can carve out a significant space. We set our sights on Amazon. I mean, it's a very aggressive target, but that's the bad boy in the room. We're looking at the news and saying, hey, this is the great thing Amazon's doing. What do we do today? This is what they've done. What do we, we need to do 10 things for every one big release they have or big piece of news that they have. Probably 1,000 things.
That's tough to do because I feel like they put out a press release every single day. They're
masters. They're good.
Yeah.
I mean, they're, Bezos is a brilliant man, and he knows what he's doing. He's got everyone in the world wrapped around his finger, right? I mean, as cities right now, even in Columbus, we're all bending over backwards. What do you want us to do? We put your headquarters here. Do whatever. You can mow everything down. Well, you can have everyone. We'd do anything it takes. And it's amazing that power that he wields. He knows it, and he's smart enough he knows what he's doing, and he's quite a competitor. And if we can get on the radar in the next 3-5 years, I think it'd be quite an accomplishment.
In the next 3 to 5 years, what would be like a gross merchandise value that you see as like a goal for F13 Works?
Yeah, I think when we get to, the big goals for us on the GMV front will be hitting 10 million, then 25, 50, and 100. And if we can get those in the next 5 years, I think we'll be on a good pace.
Something that I hadn't considered until you mentioned it just a little bit ago was the seasonality of e-commerce. We just crossed through the holiday season a few months ago. What does seasonality mean to you and your partners, and how do you prepare your business for that seasonality?
It's really interesting. So one of the nice things about the breadth of our product selection, it helps us kind of balance that seasonality. Now Q4, regardless of what you're selling, is going to be quite a season, right? It's just amazing. If you guys have not been in retail before, open a shop. It's wild. It's unexplainable. You're just like, hey, I can do anything and sell products right now. It's magical. It really is. Like, there's nothing else to it. But the rest of the year is like, ooh, okay, got to be smart, got to work hard. So for us, that it's being ready for Q4. It always, we have to be able to scale up, and part of that's using a platform like a Google Cloud where you can auto scale. You can really support a user base and order volume that you need to. But it also means understanding your partners and what they have. So we have a cool partner that does these tents, and they're real high-end camping tents, but they sell them at a medium price. So you might pay $2,000 for a nice tent, and he's selling them for like $600 or $700. They're real high quality, great tents. He knows that he only sells during spring and summer. he just knows his business. So that's how he speaks to us and prepares. And he says, hey, let's forget about everything. You don't need to feature me. Don't need to talk about me during this time. Make sure to get me out there because people will buy these and people are really actively looking for them. So different categories have different expectations there. Within the jewelry category, you have Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, and then obviously all of Q4. Apparel, you have a big spike during summer. You have these like 4th of July and all that stuff, and people buy around that. Then things can go dead during vacation season. So there are interesting spikes, and they happen. We're exposed to them, and as we get more and more suppliers in different categories, they'll hopefully smooth each other out, and we'll know we'll always have that Q4 bump, but not as many spikes along the way is my guess.
We've covered a lot of ground here, Eric. What are we missing?
I wanted to talk about your podcast. I saw that you have the Product Pain Points podcast. You love the P's. You got Product Pro, Product Pain Points, podcast.
Yeah. I know.
Jay and I were saying we need to get some poppers for our microphones because
alliterative.
Yeah.
Product Pain Points podcast is popular for the populace. It's a podcast that focuses on the tough side of e-commerce. So we get all these retailers coming to us, and they'll download the app and they'll put products on their store. They'll say, okay, what's next? What do you mean? Well, I read I could make $1 million if I opened up an e-commerce store, and I could be rich. I could put my kids through college. I could retire, quit my day job. You hear every iteration of it. And we realize that all these people are going into this without any realistic expectation. So we wanted to help with pain points. We want to say, we want to talk to experienced e-commerce professionals. We wanted to bring my experience, Myron, who I work with, experience to the table, and just say, hey, these are some of the things you run into. There are issues. It's not the easiest thing in the world. It's just like any other job in that you have to work hard. You have to have an edge. You have to do things that are different to make money. And Product Pain Points is just our take on, hey, being different. All these podcasts, you can go out and there's dozens within the e-commerce space, and some are very popular, and just say, hey, I'm going to talk to this guy. He started a brand, 6 months, he made $5 million, and this is how he did it. And then everyone goes out, thinks they can do the same thing. And that's not the case. So we run into, hey, what are these friction points that you're going to run into as a retailer? And how did we get past them? How did really smart, talented people in our networks get past them? And we've had some wonderful guests on who have told stories about how they uniquely approached the market and got products to market, how people have overcome difficulties, challenges from supply side to marketing, to finding the right niche for their product and product market fit. So we just want a little bit different angle. We want people to know that other people are experiencing the pain. And in fact, those great stories you hear, you're not hearing the 80% of that story that was dark and hard and got to that amazing finish. So that's what we want to share with the world is, hey, other people are going through this. Here's some suggestions on how to help out.
Do you have an example of how you as a founder have had a conflict or a problem or wrong assumption in the last year that was difficult for you to get through?
Yeah, definitely. Even the premise of the business was all white label. We never wanted to bring an app to market. So initially we were just a software company. We were behind the scenes. We were going to be a B2B play. So we were going to sell these suppliers software and let them take it to market. Scaling the business like that's a lot different because we just have to have some broad marketing that talks about, hey, we're a company you can be confident in, our stuff will work, and then a sales team. That's pretty simple. We found that we were much better than most of our partners at marketing their products, their apps when we take them to market, that we were more familiar with the space, that we were more active and people really trusted us. And then we found that there were a lot of suppliers out there that we didn't have access to because they weren't quite big enough, that this model didn't make sense, but we really wanted to get their products to market because they had a ton of opportunity. So that was one of the biggest shifts for us was, hey, let's take our own app to market. Let's aggregate all these suppliers and open it up to people that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford our services or just don't have the right internal team to support this type of thing. that was a huge shift. So we shifted our business, within the last 6 months in a pretty major way. And, thankfully we made that pivot because it was fantastic. The market loves it. The market's feedback to this app. And as far as app growth goes, this thing has grown way faster than any other app we've ever put out. So it's been great.
That's great. And I imagine that when you guys were having that discussion of pivoting, it wasn't an easy decision. Can you talk about that process and what you guys considered and how you ultimately made that call?
Yeah, it was difficult for sure. From, does our software support this the way it is today? What does it take to get there? And we found along the way that there are difficulties. It's really hard to know exactly how long something's going to take to do, especially when you have a small team and everything needs to happen yesterday. Can we get these suppliers on, and then what types of promises are we making to them? How do we charge for this properly? What are the issues we're going to run into? And it's crazy. You can only plan for so much of it. So we worked hard at imagining what this new world looked like for us and how it fit with our existing world. And then a part of it is just launching and getting punched in the face, right? I mean, you have to realize that you can plan for so much. You get in the ring, somebody hits you, and you adjust your game and keep going at it. So, there were things that we didn't quite know would be there that we'd have to deal with, and other things that some of them were bad, some of them were great. And it's been just working through that process. But a lot of internal, just be ready. I have an incredibly flexible team, and that helps. Part of it's that we're small. There's 5 of us, and one of those joined in January. So we had only 4 people at the time. And that inherently lends itself towards flexibility. But the natures of everyone that we work with is, hey, you have to be flexible. If you're working on this today and we have, this roadmap, that roadmap might change, it might tweak, and our users and the feedback that they give us ultimately is the most important thing. So it's not what we say in this office today, it's what the customer says.
Well, Chris, thanks for your time. Where can our listeners find out more about you or find out about F13 Works after the show?
Yeah, so f13works.com. Check out our app at productpro.io. It's a pretty cool site. You can sign up there if you want updates about that specific app. You can follow me on Twitter, SentzC, SENTZC, or LinkedIn on LinkedIn.
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
It was great, man.
Eric, we just spoke with Chris Sentz of F13 Works. What are we about to do now?
So I think it's helpful for the audience to think about Jay and I as hypothetical investors. Say we had a fund and we had a bunch of LPs. Well, we would write a deal memo after meeting with someone like Chris to solidify our thoughts on whether or not we would make an investment, to communicate our thoughts on the upside, the downside, potential risks, and key points that we took away from the interview. And all of that would be pushed to our investors so that they understood where we were coming from, the work that we did, and how we understand the investment we're making. Jay, did I miss anything on what a deal memo looks like?
Nope, that's correct. Eric and I are not investors, as you'll hear if you listen through the rest of the episode and listen to our disclaimer. But this is our mechanism for improving our thinking and understanding what that thought process looks like. And then we go back and we visit these deal memos, these thoughts 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line, and we'll say, okay, we had these thoughts about F13 Works 6 months ago, 12 months ago. Where are they now? How close were we on our assumptions? Where did we miss? And what can we learn from that?
And we just happen to do it in a verbal, informal setting. So there are 4 questions that we want to answer as we talk through this deal memo. How committed is the founder? What are this founder's chances of success in this business and in life? What does winning look like in terms of our return and revenue for the company? And why has this founder chose this business? So we might not address those all head on, but we will get to them over the course of the next 15 minutes as we talk through kind of our thoughts. So Jay, I would like to start with Chris's background and how he got into this. What did you think about that story?
I knew that Chris had spent some time in retail and e-commerce, and I knew that he was at Screened. I didn't know the full context of what he was doing at Screened. And so for him to talk basically as if he had done the customer validation of finding, we are at Screened, We wanted to sell more products. We found out that we had the ability to sell more products through Screened that were not our products. And then he went out to the market and did the research of finding out that the marketplace existed on both sides outside of Screened. And so he took that and ran with it, which, as a former product manager, I'm a big fan of customer discovery, and it sounds like a win for customer discovery. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought obviously his background in that space is helpful. His wife's background in merchandising, I think, is also helpful. And then he saw the opportunity and why he started this business, specifically Product Pro, which is the app that we're most excited about, is because he went out and tried to white label this first. So he realized that the white labeling side of things, through that, he also learned what the market opportunity was. So this isn't his first idea in the space. He's white labeled for a couple other companies, I believe 3 or 4, and he took what he learned there and developed it into Product Pro. So I think it's a well-formulated, well-thought-out plan that has roots, and he has the subject matter.
I think it makes some sense, because if you're white labeling these technologies and you're selling it to a business that's already busy and probably at full capacity with their team, and they have to now take and maintain this app, if they don't do a good job of that, they're not going to see the return on their investment in the app, which is going to give them a bad taste, which is probably what he found. And they found that it was easier to create one central app, the Product Pro app, for example, that they maintain, that a shop can plug right into their existing shop and access this product catalog. I think it makes a lot of sense. No pun intended. I think it makes a lot of Chris sense.
He could do so much with that last name for Twitter or anything, and he's just Sense Z. I wanted to give him, like, come on, man, dollars and cents, common sense. Like, you got the list is endless.
They have a lot of siblings. There are several Sense siblings. Unfortunately, I don't think there are 6 of them, because if there was, one of them would be the 6th Sense, which is amazing.
And if there were 2, the dad could always have made the joke, "Oh, here, I'll give you my 2 cents," when he's handing them off.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so
all right,
back into the stuff that matters and that people listen for. What do you think about this market, this opportunity? It seems like, their game is volume, which makes some sense also. That can be a difficult game to play. What do you think about F13 Works' approach and the opportunity they're chasing after?
So I think I said this on a previous episode, but when there is something that is abundant, you need to look for what is scarce. And that's where the money is going to be. So I think that e-commerce is extremely abundant. It's easier than ever to start a site. It's easier than ever to find products. It's easier than ever to manufacture products, which makes it harder to curate great products. So I think that the work they do on the upfront to ensure that the products are coming in have a great story, are great quality, and are essentially handpicked is going to pay a lot of dividends as they continue to build out this product and get more and more retailers on board. I'm interested, because it is a volume play, to see how that conflicts, because eventually quality and volume can't play together perfectly. So I'm interested to see how that conflict happens, but I think that's a 3 to 5 year problem.
What I think is encouraging, and there are a few things I thought were encouraging here, one being that their growth to this point has been organic, which is a good sign. The fact that both sides of this marketplace seem to recognize the win-win opportunity, which I think is great. One of the concerns that I have is the ability to protect their advantage. It seems like the barrier to entry here could be kind of low. I'm concerned with building and being dependent on a third party, but obviously he's aware of both of those things, and they're trying to move quickly, and they're trying to guard against some of the fragility of being dependent on another marketplace. I think this could work at scale, and I think what retailers are realizing, and we're just now starting to dip our toes in understanding retail and e-commerce a little bit. Amazon is a juggernaut, clearly. And for a while, it was a boon for product manufacturers and companies to say, okay, this is a new sales channel for us. Amazon's a marketplace. It's selling like crazy for us. But at some point, Amazon can crowd out the traffic going to your dedicated website, and kind of cloud your own brand, which I don't think that brands or retailers are going to be happy about. And so with tools like F13 Works that allow you to compete and continue to exist with your own control of your branding, of your presence, I think is going to be in demand in the future. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that the power that F13 Works gives back to the brand is something that Amazon doesn't do. So what do I mean by that? Let's look at an Amazon specific case and what he says is Amazonification. Amazon opens up their platform and says, we want all knife sellers in the world to put their knives on Amazon. You get anything from Cutco to fancy German blades to really cheap knives made in China. Amazon takes all of that data, they learn from it, they run all the data on it, they understand the profit margins that every single knife is making and getting, and then they launch Amazon Knives. And what does Amazon Knives do? It's at the top of the search. It learns everything, right? It's the most A/B tested knife set in the world, and it sells more than all the other ones combined. So what F13 Works is doing is allowing companies to Amazonify themselves. And they might have their core products, but they can bring on a bunch of other core products. So let's say that there is, we'll change products just to not mix up metaphors, a hammock company. And that hammock company has built these like 2-person hammocks, but they want to make sure that they're doing everything right. So they bring on 20 other products and become a hammock retailer. And then they optimize their own line based on everything they learn from those other 20 products through F13 Works. I think that is incredibly powerful for a niche retailer to be able to leverage the same thing that Amazon can do because of their breadth through F13 Works and learn from that and make their products better.
This is putting a little bit of trust and faith in these retailers and being able to understand this data and act that way. I wonder if they have the, and some of them certainly do. Some are much larger and they have the ability and the skill set and the capacity and resources to do that. I think F13 Works is going to be plugged in with a lot of brands and retailers who just won't have that capacity or ability.
Of course. And that's going to change. I mean, but it gives the brands the opportunity to, if they want to. Also, it's really interesting because on one hand, F13 Works is giving this power to someone. On the other hand, to get to the risk you said, Shopify could be doing the exact same thing to F13 Works and Oberlo, where they're learning how to develop this through their open market. And then whenever they're ready to snatch up the torch, they just develop their own in-house brand, and it completely wipes out F13 Works and Oberlo and the other ones that have developed apps on their system.
I wonder how much that actually happens. The way that this is set up, they aren't taking a transaction fee away from Shopify that Shopify wouldn't already be getting. I guess they're carving out a little bit themselves, and maybe Shopify will want that. But an environment like Shopify, I wonder how much they do actually look at how many apps they squash out a year with their own feature set, I guess I'm saying. Because there's got to be so many on the platform, and they invite that, and they want developers to do that, and developers make Shopify more attractive by doing so. I wonder how much that's happened. I've heard incredible things about Shopify as a company and as a partner to work with. So I totally hear what you're saying theoretically, and I wonder how much of that really does happen.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I just think that it's an interesting risk, and Shopify right now might be a great partner, but you never know. Leadership changes 5-10 years down the road, and all of a sudden, Shopify isn't a great partner anymore. So, okay, looking at some of the numbers that we were provided, what are you seeing in terms of maybe some sort of potential revenue, some sort of what are the KPIs? What's everything in that discussion? What did you pull out of that?
What I pulled out of that is when he talks about a monthly SaaS fee, and this is going to be a little bit of speculation. So when he talks about a monthly SaaS fee as opposed to a higher transaction fee, for example, I'm guessing that has come from conversations with the customers who say, I'm willing to do this, I'm not willing to do that. And I would love to know more about that conversation. Here we go again. This part of the podcast episode is always, what didn't we ask that we wish we would have asked? I would love to know a little bit more about that conversation, because if the average margin for the products going through F13 Works is, what do you say, 30 to 40%, Or no,
30 to 60, 30 to 60%.
30 to 60%. You would think that there might be some more room for F13 Works to justify a larger transaction-based fee as opposed to a monthly fee. To me, that's the higher upside, because if you're talking about volume anyway, the more that you take per transaction, the better off you are than charging a monthly fee. And maybe they'll get to a point where they have more leverage in those discussions and they can do that. But what gives me pause is what was the pushback from the customers saying this is the level of transaction fee we're willing to tolerate if the margins were 30 to 60%. And does that concern go away? Can they prove that the value they're bringing to the table is worth that? For example, Uber Eats charges a huge service fee and transaction fee for each thing that goes to the platform, but they go to every restaurateur that they bring on the platform and say, the math is pretty black and white. We're going to bring you this higher sales volume, which is going to dwarf the fee that we take on this. And they just lay out that math problem and show them why that's worthwhile. And it could be, we've caught Chris pretty early here. It's right. To me, there's some real exciting opportunity here, and it's just early. Product Pro was released in mid-January 2018. So a lot of this, he's learning as we go, and I'm excited to follow it. But that was something I was looking at from a revenue side as to, seems like a pretty straightforward model potentially.
I agree. It seems a little more on the conservative side as well, because if you do have these companies who are willing to pay you a monthly SaaS fee, that's recurring revenue as long as that churn isn't too high, and it's going to keep on coming through. So it's going to let you kind of have a solid base from which to grow from. But if you do want that big upside, I agree. I think something a little bit more variable in structure and something that's transaction based is going to be really important going forward. Now, one thing I will mention is that he said 5% of all of their customers do something significant in terms of revenue. So that's a very small portion. So if you're capturing 100% of your customers paying you every month instead of that only 5%, maybe that's why the decision was made.
That's interesting. I see what you're saying. 5%, I wonder how common that is. It's not your typical 80-20.
No, that is like the Pareto principle squared. It's the
80-20 of the 80-20. It's 80-20 exactly. Of the 20.
Yeah, that's what I was. It's like Inception. Yeah, it's very small, and he said that's pretty standard across Shopify. So maybe that's the rationale, and eventually they can maybe add some tiers in their percentages, because he said that transaction volume was very small, but maybe there's a way to do some differentiated pricing where if you sell X amount in GMV, it's this much. If you sell more, then you get tiered up. If you sell more, then you get tiered up again. It's a escalating ladder of transaction volume fees.
I'm not a big fan of top-down market sizing, but $4.7 trillion retail market, pretty sizable. And it did sound like, he didn't say this directly, but it did sound like he's looking at this a little bit from the standpoint of they're expanding the pie in terms of giving retailers, obviously if they're increasing the distribution of retailers, I think that creates, well, I don't know. Actually, that's probably not true, because if I'm a consumer, I'm not necessarily going to buy more just because it's on this website as opposed to another one. He's helping brands stop the consumer from going on their journey to a different website entirely. So maybe there isn't an expanding of the pie with this. It really is a carving out more of it for their partners.
Yeah, I think the pie is going to continually expand as long as the economy does, right? Because consumer discretionary spending is probably the biggest thing that's driving this 8 to 9 year boom. So maybe it's a little bit more macroeconomic than we think when we look at the expansion of the pie. But I agree that there's going to be some sort of pie redistribution, if we will, even within an expanding pie. Look at all these pie metaphors.
Love
so
pie.
Many pie metaphors.
I would like to hear your take on Chris as a founder and how committed he is, what his chances of success are, et cetera. Two things that Chris said that really stuck out to me that I love that he just volunteered without us asking. One being saying, hey, look, our analytics aren't where they need to be yet. He was pretty upfront with, this is what we've learned, this is where we're behind, and this is when we're planning to get there. Second being, he very quickly mention one of his competitors and what they were doing as a different strategy, Oberlo, and saying it's a brilliant strategy, it's a different strategy. Here's why we don't buy into that strategy with what I found to be pretty good backing. So what do you think?
So I think if you listen to or read any books by venture capitalists, they always say the most important thing is to know your numbers, right? So it's a little concerning, and maybe it's just he really was uncomfortable with 3 months of data, product pros numbers, or maybe they just haven't had a chance to really go back and review what those numbers look like. I understand we caught him very early, but it was a little bit on the concerning side for me that we didn't even get like a range or like a feeling. Every numbers question seemed to be something like, yeah, we don't really have that, and that's great. I'm all for honesty and upfront and letting me know that the numbers aren't solid. But then it was kind of a transition into it's something we need to work on, as opposed to here is like my best estimate, even if it's a terrible estimate, like 5 to 20 versus like maybe something narrower like 10 to 12. That's okay. Like give me something that I can like chew on and think about in terms of size, and don't leave me with a complete blank. And I'm not saying, and I understand that it's really early, so I'm not saying anything bad here. I wanted to know the numbers a little bit more because I'm so interested in the math behind it, because it is all about conversion and it is all about volume, and the math is so important in this business model that I felt like I left the conversation with more questions that I'm really excited to learn in the next 6 months or so.
So let's talk about that. The next 6 to 12 months or so, what are you looking for from F13 Works when we check back in a half year from now, a year from now? What are you looking for to see growth from them, or how they're doing, or the level of excitement you have for the opportunity?
I think that they have their one big KPI, right? And that's GMV. It's interesting to me because they do take a small percentage on that GMV, but it's not nearly as interesting as the amount of retailers which they're going to be able to take on. Because if the vast majority of their revenues come from SaaS fees, then the number of retailers, at least at the beginning, is going to be the primary driver of revenues. And the number of retailers they can get on the platform, that's going to be very important to me. And that's going to make me ask questions about a couple things. Churn, where is it going and what's the trend? Because I think that churn is going to be really important. If you have a bunch of people coming on and starting a Shopify account and signing up for this and then running that account for 2 months and then hating it and then leaving, and your churn is something like 65%, because that's the majority of the people who are signing up, that's a whole different business model than you get people who sign up and 5 to 10% of them leave within 2 years. And it's like, okay, that's a whole different business model. So my questions would change. But I think the number of retailers, because it sounds like the suppliers is already overlogged, would be the primary thing that I would be looking for in the next 6 to 18 months.
I like that. I like that approach. To add on to that, I think it'd be really interesting 6 to 12 months from now to revisit some of those questions you were mentioning that we didn't have straight answers for, maybe because there wasn't just the period of time to get them. So 12 months out, what are we thinking is the lifetime value now? What is that level of churn, as you're saying, that we've seen? Another question 12 months from now is, are you following the same KPIs? Maybe they'll come to the same realization. Is their model the same? Are they still doing the monthly SaaS fee as opposed to saying, hey, actually, we have a lot more time and data now, and this is what we've been able to show people is a better model for both sides? I think that'll be interesting. But certainly looking at both sides of the marketplace, how are suppliers doing? How are the retailers doing? And what else does the competitive marketplace look like? If this is a true opportunity, we're going to see more players enter than just Oberlo. Like we said, it seems that there could be space for. He even mentioned. He said, "I want to be ahead of the competition. I want to see people trying to copy everything that we do with every release." And so I think that's generally a good sign. And I'd be interested to see and check up on that, how that's going, how many competitors are there, what are they doing differently. I also would love to hear more about what the customers on both sides of the marketplace say about the software.
I am really excited about this idea. I think that it has a ton of potential. I think that, and he mentioned this in maybe half of a sentence, that there's a lot of opportunity with brick and mortar retailers. I see it. I think that the ability to aggregate great products and then allow people to choose from that menu seamlessly without having to store inventory is incredible. It is individualized drop shipping taken to the next level. I think that it could be game changing for so many sites. Because if say you're a Macy's, right? And I know that they probably have a lot of like bureaucratic things that would get in the way of this, but there is nothing stopping them from using F13 Works besides the fact that they're not on Shopify right now, but there's nothing stopping them from using F13 Works to take some products and put them on their site, right? There is that fit perfectly in line with what they're doing, even though they're not in Macy's stores. That part of it to me is incredible, especially when you work your way down the ladder into smaller boutiques and stores that sell things online, but it just happens to be things they sell in stores. If you can diversify your product range and be offering like the best hatchets across the entire world, in addition to your own line of hatchets, like that makes your store so much stronger as a hatchet selling store than if you just have one line of hatchets. I don't know why I chose hatchets there.
Hatchets, cleavers, we love sharp objects on this podcast. Something else I'd be looking for from the product front is what is the evolution of the product in terms of data that they have available and that they're giving to their partners? And second, have they moved into a WooCommerce, a BigCommerce, and what have they found in those marketplaces that is different, the same? How does that impact how they think about things?
Awesome. Well, I think that does it for me. Does that do it for you?
I think that does it for me. Thanks for listening, everybody. Please, if you have more thoughts, Eric and I are just getting into e-commerce and retail. We'd love to hear from you. Tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm, and we'll be talking to you next week. That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's guest, so shoot us an email at hello@upside.fm or find us on Twitter @UpsideFM. We'll be back here next week at the same time talking to another founder in our quest to find upside outside of Silicon Valley. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please email us or find us on Twitter and let us know. And if you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way in helping us spread the word and continue to help bring high-quality guests to the show. Eric and I decided there were a couple things we wanted to share with you at the end of the podcast, and so here we go. Eric Hornung and Jay Klaus are the founding parties of the Upside podcast. At the time of this recording, we do not own equity or other financial interest in the companies which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinions of Duff & Phelps LLC and its affiliates, Unreal Collective LLC and its affiliates, or any entity which employ us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. We have not considered your specific financial situation nor provided any investment advice on this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Never mind. Bro, that can't be matched. I'm lighting it on fire. Used to run victory laps, and still I'm not even tired. It's all about the timing, yeah, that's what they say. Well, I'ma keep on rhyming.